All right, Friday Krug Show. Chase Sr. in the house. We haven't talked for a while. We got a lot to get into. Camp around the corner. OTAs in the rear view. Let's go. Off and running on a Friday. Hope everybody's having a great day. It is June 13th. It's 10:52 on the West Coast. It's 1:52 back east, and Chase Sr. is with us. We're brought to you by Pig It Up Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corners, sports cards, and collectibles, and they're a great follow on Instagram, Sharp Corners 831 on IG, and of course, we're brought to you by Mancini's Sleep World. Best price guarantee, 365 night comfort guarantee at Mancini's. Free next day delivery. If you've been thinking about upgrading your bed, now is the time. Make sure you use the code KRUG10 at checkout. KRUG10, KRUEG 10, and you'll save an additional 10% at checkout at any of Mancini's locations or online at sleepworld.com. All right, I wanted to get into a lot of enthusiasm about OTAs and into training camp, but we're starting to get kind of a muted vibe around the 49er draft class. Alfred Collins has yet to see the field. Mykel Williams, the first-round draft choice, kept out of the OTAs. They said it was precautionary, but he's obviously got some kind of a bulky hamstring. This was a guy that missed, didn't play tons at Georgia. Played about 30% of the snaps, and the production wasn't there, and it was a draft choice based on traits. So I've got concerns about, Mykel Williams. I mean, already, just since they've drafted him, he's shown very little on the practice field, and they've acquired Bryce Huff, a guy at his position, and they spent significant money to do so. So, I've got some concerns about Mykel Williams. I've got some concerns about Ricky Pearsall. Those are the last two number one draft choices. I've got some concerns about Alfred Collins. This was my concern on draft day that I voiced literally moments after the pick is, will this guy be healthy? And he hasn't been healthy since they got him. He's yet to take part in a practice. Then there's Upton Stout and Nick Martin. And of those, draft choices, the only one right now running with the number ones is Upton Stout. So let's go to our guy Chase here and see what he thinks. Chase, how concerned should 49er fans be with the fact that Collins hasn't gotten on the field, and Mykel Williams, when he was on the field, he wasn't practicing necessarily with his teammates. They seemed like they were kind of working on his footwork, and then he sat out the last couple days of OTAs with a hamstring. How concerned are you about Mykel? How concerned are you about Collins? This is 1 and 1A as far as the rebuild on the defensive line.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some good, there's some bad here. And keep in mind that we're sitting here in June and training camp will get underway at the end of July. And so there's going to be a long while here, about 5 weeks for some of these rookies to get healthy. During rookie minicamp, when Mykel Williams was on the field, everybody seemed to be really impressed by him. The length, the physicality, the size. He looks like he has an NFL body already. We were at least able to see a little bit of what he can bring to the Niners, linking up with Nick Bosa, trying to learn some pass rush moves because he's certainly raw there. Chris Kosaric being able to work with him. And so that's certainly a positive. I would have loved for him to get some reps in at mandatory minicamp, go up against some offensive linemen, do some drills, and continue his development. With Alfred Collins, I'd say there's more of a concern there because, as you mentioned, he hasn't done anything yet. And when you're 6'5", 330, and you rely on your leg strength to produce against the run, to push the pocket, and you're dealing with this calf injury that hasn't gone away, I'm a little bit worried about that because that same calf injury also kept him from doing a lot of drills in the pre-draft process. And when you have that much weight on that calf injury and it's soft tissue stuff, I'm concerned. Now, Kyle Shanahan did say that he's going to be back and ready to go for training camp, but we've heard Kyle Shanahan say that so much over the years about a variety of players who have been dealing with these injuries. So if I were to say the biggest concern that I have for an individual player, it would be Alfred Collins. And some people will say, don't worry about it. Training camp and the preseason will come around. He can get reps there. when you get reps doing whatever you do, whether you're in a cubicle, whether you're doing what Larry and I do, you're on camera on a microphone, the more reps that you can get, the more seasoned that you'll be, the more comfortable that you'll feel, the more that you will learn about yourself, the better that you will get. So I put a lot of stock in these reps. The pluses is that CJ West, everything that we heard about him in the pre-draft, strong hands, and the strength of his punch is really impressive. We saw some of that throughout the spring. I think the power that he's able to use to get separation along the interior, that was on display. Nick Martin was flying around. He plays like a bat out of hell. Jordan Watkins made some really good plays. He's one of the biggest winners throughout the spring. And a guy like that, I think, can have an impact on this offense right from the jump. I mean, you were there. You saw Jordan James spring a couple of runs.
Yeah.
Said, I think we got some steals of this draft class. I still feel that way. But again, these reps are important for these young players because there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to grasp just from a speed, physicality standpoint when you make that jump from college to the NFL. But you're also trying to learn a new offense, learn a new defense, and you're just getting acclimated with NFL life.
How concerning is it that Ricky Pearsall, who says, hey, man, I'm not injury prone, but he's having a hard time getting on the field, hamstring problems, and it's like, if it's precautionary, but, there's always concerns. I mean, the one thing about pro football is you got to play. Yeah. You got to play. It's a painful deal, and nobody's 100% after a certain point. And I just kind of wonder about Pearsall. His job is to play the slot. Every time his name came up when he was drafted, it was like, oh, he's the next Julian Edelman. And it's like, that really made me pause because I've met Julian Edelman. I've talked to Julian Edelman. Julian Edelman's like one of the toughest guys that's ever played the wide receiver position. So now Ricky Pearsall is going to be one of the toughest guys who's ever played the position.
Different body type too between those.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like it's likely. How concerned are you about the fact that Pearsall, who has got to be a huge player for them, they didn't go get a big time receiver. They're letting him be the guy. Well, he that's fine as long as he's the guy.
Yeah. So with these rookies, it's like a big unknown, right? They're dealing with some of these issues right now, and you're like, well, we don't really know their histories. I mean, you can look back at college, and Mykel Williams was banged up a little bit, but he still played through those injuries. I think the lack of college production from last year at Georgia was partially due to the fact that he injured his ankle game 1, and then he was dealing with that nagging injury throughout the rest of the season. With Ricky Pearsall, though, it's a little bit different. And it's so funny how people will say, Chase, you're being way too hard on Ricky Pearsall. He got shot in the chest in downtown San Francisco last year. Yeah, but this is what you don't remember, is that prior to the gunshot wound, he did nothing in training camp. He did not play in a single preseason game. Why? He was dealing with a shoulder injury. He had that subluxation in that shoulder. And guess what? He was dealing with the hamstring issue. And so there's a history there to be concerned about with Ricky Pearsall because this is back-to-back off seasons in which he's been dealing with a hamstring ailment. And the comps to Julian Edelman, I don't see it. Like Pearsall can play on the inside, and I think he's better suited there. He could play on the outside. But Julian Edelman is more of a shorter, stocky wide receiver who's thicker. And Ricky Pearsall is thinner, more slender, but some of the quick twitch stuff is what allows him to win at the line of scrimmage, to beat man, which is a big reason why the Niners drafted him. It's the quick feet. It's the explosion. It's the smooth nature in which he can get in and out of cuts. It's the ability to jump up, be explosive with that 40-inch vertical, to go up and get it, come down with some of those 50-50 balls. He relies on himself being explosive as an athlete. And so the soft tissue injuries and the hamstring, that's a little bit worrisome for me. And I kind of called cap on what Kyle Shanahan said the other day. Oh, he could have participated in mandatory minicamp, but we want him to get ready for training camp. No, he wasn't healthy enough to be on the field. Otherwise, he should have been on the field. We're not talking about a Fred Warner who didn't do anything during mandatory minicamp. Fred Warner doesn't need to practice. Ricky Pearsall does. He barely played last year. He's trying to build this rapport with Brock Purdy, which is obviously really important. Last year, with a lack of that, we saw that a couple of occasions they weren't on the same page, and that led to a Brock Purdy misfire or Ricky Pearsall breaking off a route, not being in the spot that he needed to. Again, these reps are really important, especially for young players who, like Ricky Pearsall, didn't play a lot last year. He's a little bit raw. He's not necessarily acclimated with the NFL level. When on the field, I think that he can be one of the more explosive wide receivers on this team, but he has to stay healthy. And until he stays healthy consistently, I'm a little bit worried. And that shoulder subluxation, that's something that could rear its ugly head again. He didn't get that operated on. And that's just kind of a shoulder injury where if you get taken to the ground and that pops out of place, then it could lead to bigger issues. And so I like Ricky Pearsall as a player. I'll always say I think it was a reach to take him with the 31st overall pick because I think he was more of a second-round guy. But you clearly see the ability. You see the potential. He has some pop to his game, but he's not going to be able to show it if he continues to get hurt.
Are the 49ers a pretender or are they a contender for the Super Bowl? I mean, is the window open or is the window closed? Because a lot of people said, man, the window's closed. They lost a lot of players. They said, you know what? We're not, our window's open and we're going to invest in the draft. They went and had a fairly deep draft, but as you're always most enthusiastic about the draft on draft day, then all of a sudden these guys hit the field and either they can or they can't. They either do or they don't. And then suddenly, it's like everybody thought everybody thinks every draft is great until it's not. So where are the 49ers right now going? It's June 13th. Are they Super Bowl contenders? Or are they a totally mediocre team that may win 10 plus games because they're propped up by a bad schedule, but they're really not a true contender? They're more of a pretender. What do you think?
I don't think they're a pretender. I also don't think that they're a Super Bowl contender. I think that the jury is still out with this team right now because there's a realistic chance that in week 1, they start 5 rookies. Alfred Collins, CJ West at defensive tackle, Mykel Williams at defensive end, Nick Martin at either strong side or weak side linebacker, and Upton Stout in the slot. And I didn't mention Upton Stout a little bit earlier, but man, I'm really intrigued by the player, the confidence, the swagger, the physicality that he plays with, the spirit that he plays with, so much bigger than his size. He can really run and provide sticky coverage. But anyway, back to the question. Look, they might start 5 rookies on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm not sure that you can be a Super Bowl contender when you have as big of a youth movement as the Niners have had on the defensive side of the ball. They have remade the defense. Now, I do think they're going to be much improved on defense because I think the addition of Robert Saleh is one of the biggest additions that any team in the NFL had roster-wise and coaching-wise. I just think that the gap between him and Nick Sorensen, who was in over his skis and in over his head last year, is so sizable. And I think that rookie learning curve can be assisted a little bit with better coaching from Saleh. And so I think the defense will be better just because of Saleh returning, the energy that he brings, the defensive mind that he is, the ability to maximize players, put them in a position to succeed, develop those players, the ability to make adjustments in game and during the year. That's a huge thing. I also think the Niners will be better on special teams too, because Brant Boyer is an upgrade over Brian Schneider, and personnel-wise, they've made a lot of additions there in free agency and in the draft to the point where I just think that third phase of the game is going to greatly improve. The Niners also were the second most injured offense in the NFL last year. I just can't imagine them being as injured in 2025 as they were last year. So I think injury luck will be on their side. I think Kyle Shanahan rebounds. In turn, I think Brock Purdy is a little bit better. I think they become a little bit faster and explosive on the offensive side of the ball. And so I think an offense that was a top 5 overall offense last year, didn't feel like it, but they were, they're a little bit better. They're a little bit more consistent. And you factor in the Niners have the easiest schedule in the NFL. This is based upon Vegas forecasted win totals and the combined winning percentages for teams last year in 2024. the easier schedule is going to allow these younger players to ease in a little bit. So easier schedule, better coaching, health on their side. I do think the Niners top to bottom are a little bit better, a little bit more athletic. They have some youth juice on the team. I think that leads to the Niners being improved. They were 6-11 last year. I think they reverse that. They go 11-6. Do I think they're Super Bowl contenders? I don't think that yet. I need to see how these rookies fare. I need to see how healthy Christian McCaffrey can be. When does Brandon Aiyuk come back? Can Brock Purdy take another leap? I still have big questions about this offensive line. So are they pretenders? No. Are they contenders and Super Bowl contenders? I don't think so. I do think they're a playoff team. And my answer to your question, they're a playoff team. And that's a good spot to be when you retinker your coaching staff and you rebuild your roster.
I think they're a playoff team too, but I got to be honest. I think they're largely a playoff team because of this schedule. If they had a tougher schedule, I'm not sure if they'd be a playoff team. There's always unknowns that crop up, and we just don't know exactly what the unknowns will be this year. If you had to give an off-season award for somebody who's really, in your mind, taken steps forward in the off-season, who would be your off-season MVP?
Well, I'd love for you to elaborate on what you've seen from Jacob Cowing, because I've watched a lot of your shows, and all of the talk out of Santa Clara is that the coaching staff has been very impressed with him. When you get some praise from Kyle Shanahan, that's a big deal, given his receiver background, playing that position in college at Texas, and how hard he's been on wide receivers. But Jacob Cowing has added some weight. Jacob Cowing is doing a little bit of a better job of getting in and out of breaks with his routes. And you can speak to the plays that he was able to make during OTAs and minicamp. I'm interested to hear your insight on Cowing.
Well, I mean, he's to me, it's like, it's very subtle. Like, you're talking about a guy last year that was maybe 173 pounds, and this year is maybe 184 pounds, So it's like, it's not like he's put on tons of weight. But the thing that I've noticed is that last year, you always saw the front of his jersey. He was always kind of working his way back to the ball. Where now, I think I've seen the back of his jersey. I mean, he's literally they're getting him the ball while he's moving down the field, and he's making big, big plays. And I just think that between Watkins and Cowing, I think Brock Purdy's job is going to be easier because these guys are going to create more separation. And I think there's going to be fewer 50-50 balls. Yeah. So I like what I've seen a lot from Cowing because this is what I saw when I saw him at Arizona.
Right.
This guy was very, very productive. So I'm really excited about him. I would probably give, I'd probably give the offseason MVP to Austin Pleasance. Okay. Just because he went from, I don't even know if he's going to be on the team, to I think he could start. I mean, he looks really great. So that would be one. The other one, the other guy that to me is just so undeniable, and is Isaac Guerendo. Isaac Guerendo is just, I think the Niners maybe should call Christian McCaffrey aside and just say, hey, Christian, look. You've been the offensive player of the year. We got to the Super Bowl, but you weren't really 100%, and you fumbled in the game. We've seen what you are when you're 100%. You can carry us through that ultimate game the way that Saquon Barkley did. I mean, in some big games in the playoffs. So I would say the goal's got to be get to the Super Bowl, but get there with a healthy Christian. And to me, the way to do that is make this a two-headed monster. Guerendo and McCaffrey. They both can catch. They both can run. They're both fast. Don't have an 80-20 split. Don't have a 90-10 split. Have a 70-30 split. Have a 65-35 split. You know what I mean? Have that split be a little bit more with an eye on the priority being Christian being healthy for the playoffs and the Super Bowl. So that would be I think Guerendo's had a couple of, one catch out of the flat, one run. But, I mean, this guy is running the distance. He's running the length of the field on his runs, and he's just so damn explosive. So I would say he's really stood out to me, Garendo. And then I got to go one on defense that is shocking me. I got to be honest. I'm shocked by this guy because I don't know if he's good or not, but he looks great. And that's Sebastian Valdez.
Okay.
The Niners have a defensive tackle that they got out of Washington as an undrafted player named Sebastian Valdez. And he's reminding me of Brock Purdy as far as he's in these drills with these veteran guys who should be better than him. And yet Brock was better than them in those drills as a rookie. And Valdez is better than Kalia Davis and Evan Anderson and Givens and West. He's better than these guys in these defensive line drills. And Kasarik is shouting him out. When he gets back to the huddle after his rep, guys are dapping him up. I mean, there's just no doubt this guy's playing well. Now, I don't know. Football's played with pads and helmets and hitting, and we'll find out for real this summer. But file that name away, man. Sebastian Valdez, because he had 34 reps at the combine in the bench. He's very strong. He's got underrated movement ability, and he is dominating these D-line drills. I mean, he really looks great. I don't even know what to say about him. I never even heard of the guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and you and I have talked about Valdez specifically. It's really hard to find defensive tackles who can be a wide nine fit in trying to stop the run, but he's one of those guys that might be able to fulfill that type of role. A couple more just follow-ups I have, with Jacob Cowing. Yeah. At Arizona, and before that, I think he went to UTSA. I mean, a highly experienced college player. So dynamic and explosive. He had 316 college catches for nearly 4,500 yards. And last year in the preseason, I remember the stutter go on the long ball that he had when he caught the long ball from Josh Dobbs. He got behind the defense. He tracked the ball well. Dobbs kind of threw it toward the sideline. So Cowan kind of had to Willie Mays it. And I was like, that's really good body control and awareness when the ball is in mid-flight. And then we saw him get utilized on some bubble screens, and you can use him on jet sweeps. So he's not going to replace Deebo Samuel, and he's a completely different player from Deebo Samuel, but he can help replace what Deebo gave this offense, I think, with 4.4 speed and him being a gadget guy. And then with Isaac Garendo, he earned a near perfect 10 on his relative athletic score when he was coming out of college. The big thing with him is how inexperienced he was. He was at Wisconsin, then he went to Louisville, and he was a track star in high school, had to deal with some soft tissue injuries from time to time, but he started one game in his college career, and it was his last game. It was the bowl game that he played before he went into the NFL draft. But when he did play, he averaged 5-6 yards per carry. You certainly saw some juice and pop to his game. I think we saw that last year during his rookie year. You also saw him being a little bit raw. Sometimes the hole was there and he wasn't decisive. He didn't hit it. Sometimes he went the wrong way. But as he got more carries, I thought that the game kind of slowed down for him a little bit. And he's so unique. 220 pounds, runs 4.3. And so when you're that big, that physical, and you run that fast, we saw it with that 90-plus yard kickoff return against the Raiders in the preseason. We saw it with that long run against the Seahawks to kind of ice the game. He's a really intriguing player with a lot of ability, and I'm with you. Christian McCaffrey, you don't need to give him the workload that he had in 2023. He had bilateral Achilles tendonitis and a really bad knee injury. Split the carries up. And in fact, I think that helps out your offense because it gives you a couple of different backs. Incorporate Jordan James from time to time. Use McCaffrey as a slot wide receiver. You have all these concerns at the wide receiver spot. He's a really good route runner. He has excellent hands. And so flex him out wide. Use him as a slot guy. And then you give the defense a different look, something else to think about. He can win against linebackers with some of his route running skills. And so I want to see Kyle Shanahan do that a little bit more. It's so hard because McCaffrey is so special. But again, I think it makes your offense harder to plan for and against. And it just gives the defense a different look. I also need you to answer a question for me because so much talk in the spring. I've heard people say, McCaffrey looks great. He's bouncy. He's explosive. He looks fast. I've heard other people say he looks so slow. He's lost a step and he's washed. Like, where is McCaffrey? I know he's running against air, but you don't need him to be 100% right now in May and June. He even said it himself. Like, he wasn't looking to be in his 2023 form. He wanted to practice every day, feel good, and be healthy. And he has plenty of time to work on the speed and explosiveness and the twitch to his game. So how did McCaffrey look? Because that's a huge question that I'm curious about, and others as well.
Well, I mean, it's debatable, obviously, because it's shorts and no pads. But to me, I'll just defer to the words that I put out there when I saw it the first time. I thought he looked bouncy. I thought he looked healthy. I thought he looked pretty explosive. I thought he looked faster at points in these OTAs that I ever saw him look at any point last year.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing. I asked him, by the way, and I'll share the screen on this one. I asked him a question the other day because I
heard that.
My,
it's a good question.
My question was, it's like, I know you're healthy now, but you haven't played football in forever. Right. Are you actually healthy? Are you just kind of rested? And here's what he had to say.
A lot of time kind of building back a base.
Christian, how are you feeling as far as the PCL, the Achilles? Do you have any pain? Do you have any concern that when you start playing football again that some of that may return?
No, I feel great. I think this offseason I spent a lot of time kind of building back a base, starting from scratch. So a lot of it was rehab, and wanted to put myself in a position where I didn't miss a day of OTAs and I could practice and play football again, be healthy and not miss a day. And I did that. And now it's, we can kind of kick back up to
Christian.
Okay, so he's basically saying, hey, look, I'm healthy. It's behind me. I figured it out, so on and so forth. But nevertheless, part of the answer is that football is violent. Part of the answer is that football, causes injuries. All I'm saying is, look, get to the finish line with your guy and have a chance. Give yourself a chance in the ultimate game. Don't run this guy into the ground. Don't use this guy. Bobby T said something to me that was like, it was interesting, but it was also kind of ominous. He's like, I let Christian be Christian. You're the coach. Stop letting Christian be Christian. You're the coach.
Shanahan said the same thing.
You decide when he plays. Shanahan, I defer to Christian. Stop it. You're the coach. It's you're the guy who hasn't won the Super Bowl. Maybe you would win the Super Bowl if you got to the Super Bowl with Christian McCaffrey ready to roll. Stop this 85-15 usage split between McCaffrey and everybody else isn't going to work anymore. It's a long year. I would like more of a, minimum 75-25. Minimum. I got to see Garendo get touches. I got to see some of these other guys get touches. I realize Christian's better than them at everything. So what? It's a long year. Mix in, the Eagles, they went with Barkley heavily, but you still got to mix in a Gainwell every now and then. And especially when everybody knows, like when Niners are going to win some games, they're playing some really bad teams. They're going to have a lead in the fourth quarter. They're going to try to put games away by running the ball. Run the ball with somebody not named Christian McCaffrey at that point. You have to be able to put, when everybody knows you're going to run, the running back's going to take tons of hits. It's a little bit of a sacrificial lamb position as you're putting away the game. Don't take those carries off of Christian. And if you don't, guys like me are going to talk about it. And then the fans are going to talk about it. And then people are going to make you do it. So either do it before we make you do it. That's what I would say. Because right now, Shanahan is in this mode of like, I asked him this question a couple years ago. Hey, Kyle, Christian's on pace for like 400 plus touches. Is that what you want? Is that sustainable? And he's like, well, he's our best running back. He's our best receiver. He's our best blocker. I get it. But I mean, you're going to have to use your backups eventually one way or another. You might as well sprinkle them in as opposed to being forced to go with them. I don't know. They have a very weird approach when it comes to managing McCaffrey's touches.
Well, you think back to Mike Shanahan when he was with the Broncos in the 90s, he ran through a bunch of running backs. And Terrell Davis's prime, he's a Hall of Famer. It didn't last that long because Mike Shanahan ran him into the ground. You think about since Shanahan has come to the Niners in 2017, I mean, how many different times have different running backs led the team in rushing yards? I mean, there's been a lot of different guys who have either popped or led the team in rushing yards because Shanahan, Kyle, like Mike, has run through a bunch of backs. And the one thing, too, with the Eagles in the Super Bowl, Saquon had under 60 rushing yards in that game. I mean, the Chiefs made it a point to sell out against the run. They forced Jalen Hurts to beat them. And to Jalen Hurts' credit, he played his best game of the year, and he was surgical against Spags' defense. But if you didn't have Saquon on the field, how the Chiefs would have defended the Eagles would have completely changed. And so when you don't have McCaffrey on the field, how teams defend you, it completely changes. We saw that last year, and the Niners really had a hard time in making the necessary adjustments without CMC. And that's not even mentioning their third down struggles, how they struggled in the red zone. And it's not like we're talking about Patrick Taylor getting carries or Israel Abanikanda. You have Isaac Orendo. You moved up in the 4th round to take him. You drafted Jordan James in the 5th round. Use these players, and you extended McCaffrey, and you gave him a pay raise. So keep the future in mind a little bit, knowing that he's a 29-year-old running back with a large injury history. One more thing, too, that stood out with what McCaffrey said there. If you want to nerd out, I nerd out all the time on this stuff, but McCaffrey is so detailed with his offseason workouts. And if you just go on YouTube and you search Christian McCaffrey track workouts, you will see how technical he is with his training methods. And what he said in that clip, provoked by the question that you asked him, he's like, I just wanted to build back a base after starting from scratch. Ladies and gentlemen, he had bilateral Achilles tendonitis, right? And then he had that knee injury where he was in this bulky knee brace. And that's a pretty severe knee injury that he had. I'm not looking for him to be at tip-top speed in May and June. I'm looking at what he looks like in August, September, and throughout the regular season. By design, he's not going to peak in May and June. And if you go back and look at some of his track workouts, like all of that is being done to plan for the regular season, not for minicamp, not for OTAs. His training methods, and he's worked with the speed coach for a really, really long time. It's all to build up toward the regular season. And so Christian McCaffrey knows that. He answered it with your question. Just the simple fact that he's been healthy right now is huge for the Niners because he's going to play such a huge role with this Niners offense in 2025 if he stays healthy. And that unit is completely different when he's on the field as compared to when he's off it. We saw that last year.
Here's the stat that I think all Niner fans should remember. Christian McCaffrey has missed 10 games, at least 10 games, in 3 of the last 5 seasons.
Yep.
So he's healthy now, but doesn't mean he's going to be healthy at the end. And him being healthy
2021, he played a combined 10 games, and then last year he only played 4.
And he's one of the best players in football when he's healthy. So keep him healthy. And if you didn't have other backs, I'd say, you got to bite the bullet. But you do have other backs. Run them. Okay, the Rams reached an agreement yesterday with DJ Humphries. This is interesting because DJ Humphries was a Niner. Oh, and then he wasn't. What do you think happened here? I mean, this was kind of interesting. The 49ers did not touch tackle in the draft. They tried, didn't bounce their way. Then they, after the draft, they had Austin Pleasance, but they signed DJ Humphries. They signed Andre Dillard, and then they signed Nicholas Petit-Frere. Petit-Frere was god-awful and was gone like 72 hours after he showed up. Humphries, I don't know if there was a disagreement on the contract. I don't know what happened, but he just he was there and then he wasn't there. Dillard was signed, and yet he's been hurt. He hasn't gotten on the field. And it's hilarious because all those guys have high profiles. Some of these guys were first-round picks. And yet Austin Pleasance looks like he's probably better than all of them, and he was their in-house guy. What do you know about DJ Humphries and how that thing fell apart on the Niner end?
Well, I got to give you some credit because you and I talked about the Bryce Huff trade months before it happened. And then about a week or two before Nicholas Petit-Frere got cut, you had said, he looks horrible. He looks slow.
Yeah,
and
he looked
Austin
bad.
Pleasance looks great. Well, what happened a couple of weeks later? You also said, what did you say? Nicholas Petit-Frere is not going to be. What did you say?
I said, we'll have a petite. I said, Nicholas Petit-Frere is going to have a petite future with the 49ers.
Yeah. And
he will not be here long.
He got cut a week or two later. You also were gassing up Austin Pleasance. And then Chris Forster comes out and he says, I've been coaching him hard because I'm a believer in the player. He looks really good. And coming out of OT as a mandatory minicamp, everybody else after you has said, Austin Pleasance, he's looked damn good. He could be the top backup offensive tackle for this team. So
he might be better than McKivitz. Yeah. I mean, I and it's a weird thing for me to say, because I can see like everybody else that the guy's been on 9 teams or whatever, or he's had all these different stops. But it's funny. It's like I went up to Forster in the in the interview the other day, and I said, Chris, Austin Pleasance. That's all I said. Austin Pleasance. And he's like, I know. It's like it's crazy. We liked him in the tryout camp. We thought he played well when he got on the field at the end of the year, but we had no idea that he would come back and be this big, this fast, this explosive. He's like, he is a huge mover. I mean, the quote was, let me see if I have it. The quote was like something like, I think he's really special. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, here it is. Here's Forster. And Forster does, he's pretty verbal. He'll tell you things. But here's what he said. He said, last season when he signed here, I didn't see the speed. But now, all of a sudden, he's moving. He's just a giant that can really move, and I don't know what happened. I really think he's got something in there that's special. I just don't know how soon he'll be ready. So, I mean, Chris Forster is in the ear of Connor Colby and Austin Pleasance, and it's hilarious, Chase. He's got 15 offensive linemen. The other 13 guys do reps, and he's just like yelling at a normal rate. But when Pleasance and Colby, he's like yelling maniacally. And you can tell it's not because they're bad, it's because they're good. Yeah. And I asked him about it, and he had a big smile on his face because he knows I know. And he's like, yeah, you're right. He's like, I see something in these guys. And I know that we got to get it out of them, and we got to get it out of them soon. So I'm coaching them hard because I see the potential. And I do too. I mean, Colby looks really, really polished, and Pleasance looks really big and really fast and really explosive. My question will be, is he better than McKivitz, and could McKivitz play center or left guard? Or could you play Pleasance? He's so big, he's so physical. Could you play him at left guard over Ben Bartch? So I don't know. I'm not sure how they're all going to be slated this year, but I will say this. Between Colby and Pleasance, the Niners have a couple good young offensive linemen, and I think there are a lot of people that are going to rip the Niners in the media are going to point to, they didn't draft an offensive lineman, thus their offensive line sucks. And I get it, and I wanted them to draft an offensive lineman. But the last part, I don't know if I'm down with. I know they didn't draft offensive linemen, but I'm not convinced their offensive line is going to be bad. It may not be stellar. I mean, Dieter thinks it's going to be a top 5 offensive line, and I think Dieter's pretty smart. So we'll see.
Damn. Yeah, I mean, I like the selection of Colby. You talk about him being polished. I mean, he started more than 40 games at Iowa, and they really develop offensive linemen at a high clip at that program, and they're nasty offensive linemen oftentimes too. You get those Midwestern wrestlers in that program who go to Iowa because they dream of going to that program. They just play with this nasty streak. It's also crazy how the Niners kind of stumbled upon Austin Pleasance, if he can become something, because they had all those injuries last year at offensive tackle with Trent Williams and then Jalen Moore going down. So they signed Charlie Heck and Austin Pleasance out of nowhere. And Pleasance this spring has come back, and he's looked awesome in the eyes of you, which is great. As for DJ Humphries, what's interesting on the Rams front is that their left tackle, Alaric Jackson, is dealing with blood clots. So I'm not sure if DJ Humphries got wind of that, if he knew that there could be an opening for him to start at left tackle for a team that I think is a bona fide Super Bowl contender and could very well win the NFC West. But DJ Humphries, outside of 1 year in his NFL career, which has been a very good one, former first-round pick, he's been a Pro Bowl player, he's been a team captain. Last year he was bad, but he was coming off a torn ACL that he suffered 2 Decembers ago. He's only played left tackle. And so with the Niners, he would have been a definite backup, and maybe he could have competed with Colton McKivitz, but it would have been at right tackle. And maybe he didn't like the terms of the contract that the Niners had offered him. Weird situation, obviously, because his agency tweeted out that he had agreed to terms with the Niners. And then the report was that, he never agreed to terms with the 49ers. So something happened. Either there were terms in the contract, language in the contract that DJ Humphries didn't like. Maybe the money wasn't good enough. Maybe he eyed an opportunity with a team where he would have an opportunity to play a little bit more. And with this Alert Jackson news, that just came down on this Friday, June 13th. Blood clots are tricky. I mean, players can miss a lot of time with that. And so there's a very good chance that DJ Humphries can try to revive his career a little bit and be the starting left tackle for the foreseeable future for a Rams team that is locked and loaded going into 2025. And they were the only team in the playoffs that actually gave the Eagles a game last year.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff there. One of the things I go with on the Niner Nightly show on KMBR is the Niner stat of the day. It kind of forces me to find some information every day that I do the show that I think reveals something. And so, and it's easy, right? You can easily find stats everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Twitter, you name it, any article any commentary that you do, like I watch a lot of your videos. You guys have, Chat Sports puts out a number of great stats, and there's a tremendous amount of information. Grant puts out a tremendous amount of information. David puts out a tremendous amount of information. Barrows, Mayoko, it's all out there. But sometimes I'll just look up a guy, and I'll be like, okay, here's the stat of the day. I'm going to share the screen on this one because we were talking before about Jacob Cowing. Here's probably the number one reason I'm really enthusiastic about Cowing. This is his college stats. He played 5 years, 3 years at UTEP, Texas, El Paso, and then 2 years for Arizona. But look at these numbers over here as far as receptions in the last 3 years. 90 in his last year, 85 the year before that, 69 the year before that. Look at the yards, 848, 1,000, 1,300. And look at the touchdowns, 13, 7, and 7. That's 27 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons. And on average of about 1,000 yards per season and an average of about 82, 83 catches per season. So Jacob Cowing is a productive player. Now, Guerendo is the exact opposite. He didn't have production. He has awesome traits. Cowing, though, does have great production. And I think there's reason to believe when you look at his college production that he's going to be a significant player for the 49ers. If you could add a piece to the 49ers, who would you want to add? Or what would you want to add? And then this is a tough one because some people, say, go get Trey Hendrickson. Well, he's making a ton of cash, and you're basically going to have 2 Bosas making Bosa kind of money. So that's probably not going to happen. So those are super expensive guys. Go get Myles Garrett. That's probably not reasonable. But if you could add a piece, is there a piece out there that's gettable that you think kind of moves the needle?
Yeah, those 85 catches, by the way, for Cowing led the country that year. That's why it was in bold. And I said earlier, UTSA, he played at UTEP. So UTSA, University of Texas at San Antonio.
Burford played there.
Yeah, exactly. Got those confused.
They're both tiny little schools.
Exactly. And then he went to Arizona, and as you just showed there, he really balled out. So look, I mean, along the offensive line, the best player that you can add in free agency is at guard, Brandon Scherf. But with Connor Colby looking good, Dominic Pooney's a top 10 guard, Ben Barch is a cost-controlled player. I think the Niners are okay there. At offensive tackle, you're not going to find any good players at this point. That's why the Niners added Andre Dillard. That's why they tried to add Nicholas Petit-Frere before he had a Petit impact for San Francisco. They have Austin Pleasance. They like Colt McKivitz. Trent Williams is back. He looks slimmed up a little bit. He's motivated to have a really good 2025. I think they're fine at wide receiver. They thought about Gabe Davis there for a little while. Doesn't look as though that's going to happen. I think teams might be worried about that meniscus injury in his knee that he suffered.
By the way, I don't want to interrupt you, but I got to ask you at some point, because I'm my guy, the guy that I really believed in, the guy that I touted over and over and over again, and had Niner fans say, Krug, you don't know shit, you're wrong, you don't know football, blah, blah, blah. Terrace Marshall showed up in Philly, and it's funny how the best GM in the game and I see eye to eye, and now Terrace Marshall is like the hot name in Philly.
Yeah. You know who else
is that true?
You know who else is too?
Danny Gray. I saw you say Danny Gray.
So,
but is Terrace Marshall really doing things in Philly? I'm sorry to interrupt you on this one, but I just
no. Hey, I kind of like the back and forth here. So Terrace Marshall and Danny Gray were two of the biggest winners during OTAs and minicamp for the Eagles. Now, obviously, we'll see what happens when the pads come on, but Danny Gray is a player who ran a 4.3 coming out of SMU, highly productive player for the Mustangs, and he just never put it together with the Niners. But that 4.3 speed is really intriguing, especially when you add the speed component to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Terrace Marshall and Danny
also
Gray
ran 4.3s.
Yeah.
He also ran 4.3 pick. And Terrace Marshall was blazing fast. If you do your Terrace Marshall deep dive, you'll find that guy was more so than Chase, more so than any of those other guys, Jefferson. He was the guy in high school that everybody wanted.
Yep.
It was Terrace Marshall. He was the 5-star guy. So I'm not saying, there's all kinds of 5-stars that flame out. But I'm telling you, this guy's got size. He's got straight line speed, and how he knows personnel, man.
Yeah,
And
look, Gray has draft pedigree, 3rd rounder, 4.3 speed. Terrace Marshall was a 2nd round pick. He's 6'2", 205. He can run a 4.4. And during mandatory minicamp for the Eagles, there were some plays where he was going up to get it. Same can be said in OTAs. And so the Eagles last year drafted Aniyah Smith out of Texas A&M. And Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. There is a chance that Danny Gray and Terrace Marshall could challenge those former draftees for wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 5 behind A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jahan Dotson. So that becomes like a sneaky big battle for the Eagles in training camp, is those two players right there. It's
crazy, but I'm one, I'm touting it because I've been touting it, but 2, because Howie is on top of the football world, and Howie and I are seeing it the same. By the way, my favorite guy at the Niner local pro day, Giles Jackson. Has he done anything in the OTAs for the Eagles?
He's quick. No. He's small, but he's quick.
He's
done
really
much.
quick.
Yeah. Hasn't.
I'll tell you another guy that I'm intrigued by. What do you think of the Niner quarterback room? Curtis Rourke is hurt, right? So he's gonna redshirt for the year.
Yeah.
And then it comes down to you've got Mac Jones and Tanner Mordecai and Purdy. I bring this up because I'm looking at the Eagles. From what I'm hearing, DTR is going to get cut. Dorian Thompson Robinson, the former UCLA Bruin. I always liked Dorian Thompson Robinson. Do you like Dorian Thompson Robinson more than Tanner Mordecai, or would you be interested in Dorian Thompson Robinson as a 49er if the Eagles wind up cutting him and going with McKee and McCord behind Hurts, which is what they're going to do?
Yeah, and I think McCord last year was awesome at Syracuse. Eagles took him in the 6th round. He was one of my favorite quarterbacks in this draft class, honestly. Good size, really smart player, very accurate, gunslinger mentality, really good production last year, more than 4,700 yards, 37 touchdowns. I thought it was pretty telling how he had a better year once he found his confidence with Syracuse compared to the year prior with Ohio State, when he was throwing to draftees and draft picks all around the field. So I really like Kyle McCord's game, and he played better this spring than DTR. I know it's early, but with where the Eagles drafted him and the ability that he has, I think he can be a better player long-term and maybe right now than DTR, which would then mean that DTR gets cut. I would love for the Niners to pick him up. I think that DTR is better than Tanner Mordecai. Both are really good runners. I would say that DTR is a better and more experienced thrower of the football. And I would be really intrigued to see what Kyle Shanahan can do in trying to develop a dual threat quarterback, because that's exactly what DTR is.
Lynch went on the McAfee show, and I mean, it was a lot of softballs. I mean, it really was. I kind of commented on that a couple times, but I mean, it's just softball after softball. But one of the things he was asked about was Brandon Aiyuk, and he seemed to kind of put to bed the idea that there's some kind of discontent or rift. After hearing that, does it change your thoughts at all on the future of Aiyuk? Do you think Aiyuk is going to be a Niner, or do you think Lynch is just putting a smiley face on this and I mean, he's hurt now, so he's not going anywhere right now, but do you think he's going to be a Niner long term, or do you and all this talk is nothing, or do you believe some of the talk or some of the indications that seem to indicate that he's not happy?
You can definitely chalk it up as GM speak, but honestly, when I heard what John Lynch said, it didn't sound like Brandon Aiyuk is a player who the Niners are done with and want to trade. John Lynch said that his recovery is going amazing, that he looks great, and it's amazing how well he's doing, that Brandon Aiyuk has been and will continue to be a big part of what they do and have done. And he said that with Brandon Aiyuk, we made a big investment in him. This offseason, a lot of GMs across the NFL have talked about players who are on the chopping block, and they've pretty much come out and said, yeah, we don't really see him as being a part of our plans for the future. The Ravens kind of did that with like Mark Andrews, who's still on the team, and that's led to a lot of awkwardness. With John Lynch, he kind of pumped up Brandon Aiyuk and talked about him as being a part of the Niners' plans. So I know some people might say, it's GM speak. What else is he going to say? I don't know. John Lynch has been pretty honest and forthcoming, and he's come out and said a lot of like things that have ended up happening and become true as the Niners general manager. And I thought that he spoke highly of Brandon Aiyuk, and I imagine the Niners are trying to like deal with some of the baggage. I don't know why Aiyuk is unhappy. Like, he got $76 million in guaranteed money. He's making $30 million per year. He became an all-pro player developing under the Niners' watch, but hopefully they can get that figured out, because Aiyuk, when healthy, is a really special player. And prior to him getting hurt in the whole contract saga last year, he was a beloved Niner. I mean, he played the game the right way, played it hard, physical, always a willing blocker, was willing to make sacrifices for his teammates. And then something has just kind of happened as he was looking for that deal where he took to social media and became the bad guy for this Niners organization and caused a lot of problems. But again, with what John Lynch said, I was like, okay, it seems as though they envision him being a part of their plans. Hopefully he can stay healthy and get healthy.
A lot of people saying pump and dump, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard to evaluate. I mean,
again, you could take it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I don't know what his value is, and I don't know if that's even the Niners' mindset at this point. It's really difficult to put your arms around that one. Couple last thoughts. Bryce Huff. I want to share the screen on this one. This is kind of interesting. This was Brandon Graham the other day talking about Bryce Huff.
Every play, it's always
and his days in Philly and why it didn't work. And I know you've seen this before, but let's hear this one more time.
But the Jets, it was just that defense, man. I know what it's like playing in that 4-3 wide 9. Go get it. Every play, it's always stop the run on the way to the quarterback. That's the slogan and that type of defense. So that's what it's all. I feel like it's all scheme. I mean, I've seen different guys flourish in different systems, and then you see them get in another system is different. And what they asked of them this year, it just wasn't a great marriage, I would say, because I know Huff can rush. I see him doing all that, but sometimes it's just different with the type of scheme and what people ask of you and they want you to be able to do. And maybe it just wasn't that for Vic Fangio or I mean, you don't really know. I mean, I just know that he a baller, man, and he hopefully for him, I want it to be a win-win for the team and win for him. But in this case, I want him to be happy, go out if it's here or somewhere else, I want him to be able to go show what he can these prime years for him.
What happened in Philly with Huff? I mean, is it simply, he's a defensive end, he's not an outside linebacker, he can't do it from a 2-point stance, he can't drop into coverage, and they ask their guys to do that, and the Niners don't, and he'll be a fit here? Or was there regression? Is there you cover this team, this Eagles team and the Niner team, and you do it on a daily basis. So what can you tell us about Huff and his time in Philly?
This is the huge thing for me, and this is why I think that he can be a great addition for San Francisco. And with how busy I've been over the last couple of weeks, going to a wedding, being in a wedding, you and I actually haven't been able to talk about this Bryce Huff trade.
Right.
With the Eagles, Vic Fangio runs a 3-4. And so Bryce Huff was brought in. Howie Roseman gave him $34 million in guaranteed money. And the Eagles' thought process was, okay, this is a former undrafted free agent who has progressed, he's improved, he's gotten better every year. And in 2023, he had 10 sacks and 57 pressures while playing less than 50% of the snaps. Let's sign him because this is an emerging player who we can find ways to make it work. He has this innate ability to push the pocket, collapse the pocket, and get after the quarterback. We can make it work with our scheme. When he was with the Jets under Robert Saleh was running the 4-3, the wide 9. Bryce Huff was in a 3-point stance, 2 feet on the ground, 1 hand in the ground, and he was playing right defensive end, left defensive end. Saleh used him in a very versatile way. In Vic Fangio's defense, running the aforementioned 3-4, the Eagles tried to use him as a stand-up outside linebacker who sometimes would have to drop back in coverage. That impacted Huff for a variety of reasons. When he is in that 3-point stance, he's able to look down the line of scrimmage, he's able to time the snap, and he is very explosive, quick and twitchy when getting off at the line of scrimmage. He's also a little bit of a shorter player. And so when he has his hand in the dirt, he's able to get good leverage and bend the edge and get beneath some of those offensive tackles and win with his explosiveness. When you are a 3-4 outside linebacker, a lot of times it's more read and react. And his get off wasn't as fast because he was a stand-up pass rusher. He wasn't used to being a stand-up guy. He was used to putting his hand in the dirt in a 4-3. And then also, he's never been a great run defender, but sometimes he would have to drop back in coverage and then read and react in going up against the run. And so Robert Saleh knows how to use him. Robert Saleh has familiarity with him. Bryce Huff is the perfect addition for Nick Bosa and this defensive line. You're not going to ask him to be a 3-down player. You're going to ask him to be a speed rusher Bugatti guy off the edge, to move with velocity like a Ferrari, and be that pass rush specialist. Nick Bosa has not had this kind of guy his entire career. The Niners thought they were getting that guy in D Ford. He barely played with Nick Bosa. He had that neck injury. And so with build and with game, Bryce Huff is very similar to D Ford, who prior to the Niners was a terrific player for the Kansas City Chiefs. And so the Niners give up a 5th-round pick, which can become a 4th. They have a bevy of picks next year, so that doesn't really matter. The Eagles restructured his contract. The Niners are paying him less than $8 million this year. He's a good scheme fit, has familiarity with Saleh, and he's a great compliment to Bosa. I think this trade is a huge win. Knock it out of the park for the San Francisco 49ers. And a lot of the Eagles beat writers have said, look, he's probably going to be very productive for the Niners. That's fine because it just didn't work out with the Eagles. They also drafted Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith, 2 young players who they really like. They signed Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari, and they were ahead of Bryce Huff in the edge rusher rotation. Right from the jump when Huff was signed by the Eagles, Vic Fangio never trusted him. He wasn't running with the ones in training camp last year. He played deep into preseason games. And it just comes down to the simple fact that he wasn't a scheme fit. With the Niners, he will be. And I think he's going to be a really productive player this year. And I know that you've shared a lot of that as well.
Yeah, no, I'm a believer. It's interesting because Chris Kasarik, when he was asked about it the other day, he had a really interesting answer. He's got a little frog in the throat today, but he said the step sequencing is quite a bit different,
So different.
for a 4-3 defensive end in a wide 9, get up the field, than in a 2-point stance. And this guy, is not even in a Nick Bosa 3-point stance. He's in a 4-point stance, like a track star. I mean, he's literally and the one thing about Bryce Huff, if you're looking at him in practice, you're thinking he's not that impressive. He's, as far as his physique. They list him at 6'3". He doesn't look 6'3". I'd say
he was a UDFA. Remember that. Like, he was a UDFA for a reason.
Right. And he's 6'1", 250. But he's rocked up in the shoulders.
Yep.
He's really strong up top. But where he's really special is he's got the get off, and it's like he's got it down. So every step is choreographed like a ballerina, and this guy comes firing out of his stance, and it's funny watching him. He doesn't look like much at practice, and then all of a sudden he gets lined up, and Chris is barking the cadence, and he goes, and every time Chris is like, great get off, because there is no wasted movement. Yep. It's choreographed, it's streamlined, it's been worked on. He's just really, really good at getting off the football, and it's a skill. I mean, give you an example. What I love the most about CJ West right now is that if you watch his college film, he doesn't get off the ball. He gets left like a horse in a starting gate. He's constantly not getting off the ball, and he's winning reps anyway. That tells you how physically dominant he is. They'll eventually get CJ West to get off the ball. And when he does get off the ball, he'll get his hands on the offensive lineman before they get their hands on him. He'll totally change his thing. So I think CJ West doesn't get off the ball. Huff gets off the ball. And obviously, if you can get off the ball, you can cover up a lot of weaknesses in your game. Okay, last question. What is your biggest concern? And I bring this up because we have one super here from Ricky Williams. He says, 2 of the best minds in this space. Great show, fellas. Thank you, Ricky. He says, you're betting money. What's more likely, that the Niners are buyers or sellers at the trade deadline, and what position? So this kind of folds right into my question to you is, as we sit here, Chase, in mid-June, June 13th, we know what the Niners' big concerns were coming into the offseason. What is your biggest concern about the upcoming 49ers season in mid-June?
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, Ricky. And I think with the Niners having the second most cap space in the NFL, if they are competitive and if they are in a position to make a playoff and Super Bowl run, they'll be buyers at the deadline. I mean, look at the moves that they have made over the last few years. They traded for Chase Young. They traded for Christian McCaffrey. They traded for Charles Omenihu. They traded for Jordan Willis. If they're in a spot to be Super Bowl contenders, they will make a move to improve their football team and be aggressive. And I think that they are going to be a winning team going into the deadline. As for what position that is, it all depends on how healthy you are at certain spots and the holes that you have potentially on your roster. And we'll see what happens when you go midway through the year, where this roster is at that spot. As for my biggest concern with this team, I would probably say right now it's the inexperience at linebacker, because D. Winters and Nick Martin are unknown commodities. I would say the uncertainty at safety, because Malik Mustafa is coming off that injured ACL. Jair Brown had that ankle surgery, and you're running Jason Pinnock and Richie Grant. Who
have looked good. I'll give, we got to give those guys a little credit.
I was going to ask you how they've looked.
Richie Grant, especially.
Former second-round pick, by the way.
He looks good. And then I know people who follow me and watch every video, when the Niners signed Richie Grant, the word was, and I read it in 7 articles, he's a special teamer. He's not a special teamer. He's not. He's a scrimmage player. He is a much better scrimmage player than people think. He was, as Chase just said, he was a second-round pick at Appalachian State. He's a really good football player.
UCF,
he has shown some dominant traits on the field. To me, if you say who's looked good that I didn't really expect to look good, Jason Pinnock and Richie Grant.
Yeah, Pinnock is a really interesting player too. He's played corner and safety for the Giants. His wingspan is so long. And if you look at his TFL quarterback hit and sack numbers, he's been a really good player around the line of scrimmage. And so Robert Saleh knows that. And I expect Robert Saleh to utilize him to his strengths, unlike Nick Sorensen, who would probably have him dropping back in coverage. And so, look, you saying that Richie Grant, Jason Pinnock look good, that's great, right? But the uncertainty at safety, I think, is a little bit of a concern for me.
Is there a safety you want? I mean, some people are saying Ramsey. Some people are saying
out there.
Who do you like? Blackman?
Justin Simmons and Julian Blackman are still free agents right now.
I haven't studied either guy to say exactly the strengths and weaknesses. I would say that they like Siegel's coverage ability. And they like Malik Mustafa as a strong safety, I think.
Siegel runs 4.3 too. Runs really well.
Yeah, Siegel runs incredibly well. But I've heard that like he's really got it between the ears. Okay. So I mean, now you've got Pinnock, you've got Grant, you've got Odom. I mean, they have some numbers there. I don't know. Part of me says, yeah, go for one of those veterans, but I don't know what their strengths and weaknesses are, or if it would be better to wait until the cut down and see who kind of shakes free.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Look, I think this is a good football team. Like, I do like this roster, especially if they can stay healthy with the coaching upgrades. But yeah, to just rapid fire go through it. There's question marks at linebacker because Nick Martin and D. Winters are unproven. There are question marks at safety because of the injuries to your two starters in Mustafa and Jair Brown. It's great that the depth pieces look good so far. Cornerback depth is a little bit of an issue. If Diamador Lenore were to go down, that's not good, because at outside corner, the first guy up there would be Trey Brown with Upton Stout in the slot, and then Renardo Green on the outside. There are question marks at wide receiver because of Ricky Pearsall's injury, Brandon Aiyuk's injury, but it's good that Jacob Cowing, Jordan Watkins have been impressing. I think Demarcus Robinson was a really good pickup for the Niners.
He's looked really good, by the way.
He's looked really good. Every year of his NFL career. He was top 10 in yards per catch last year. He's not a burner, but he makes plays downfield. He could take the top off of the defense. He can go up and get it. And then I would add offensive line in there as well, just because we're not sure who's going to be the left guard. Colton McKivitz is just okay. If Trent Williams were to go down and Dominic Pooting were to go down, that could spell disaster, and Jake Brendel is completely average to me. So those are my biggest concerns coming to mind right now for the Niners. How about you?
So I made a list of like the potential concerns, right? And this is what was on the list. Kicker.
Oh, kicker. Duh. Yeah.
Special teams.
Punter now too.
Punter, special teams, kicker, punter, special teams, just all of it.
I'm just thinking defense.
Offensive line, running back depth, wide receiver separation was a major issue last year.
Yeah.
Red zone offense was a disaster last year.
Third down too.
Run defense was a disaster last year. Third down defense was a disaster last year. Injuries and pass rush. And I'm looking at this thing. Okay, so let's go through it. The wide receiver separation, I think they've addressed it. I like Cowing. I like Watkins. I think they're going to have more separation this year.
Pearsall can separate if he can stay healthy.
I think even Demarcus Robinson had a play. It's like Robinson had a play the other day where he made it look like he was covered, but him and Purdy threw it to a spot where he knew Robinson was going to be. Robinson waited while the ball was in the air till like the last second, and then moved over at the last second and caught the ball in the clear.
A little box
and it's
out.
And it was like, wow, that is how you can run 4.6 and still average 16 or 17 yards per reception. He's really good with the ball in the air. So I think wide receiver separation is been addressed. Red zone offense, I think that's a lot about Christian and his health. The run defense, I think, has been addressed in the draft. I think the running back depth with Garendo and Kiner and James, I think that's been addressed. I even like Izzy Abanaconda. I think the O-line, as I said, I think even though it wasn't addressed as a primary, I think the backups were addressed. I like the special teams just because, how could it be worse, right? How could it be worse?
Yeah.
But I would say the two areas that worry me, one, generally injuries and specifically injuries to Christian.
Yeah.
That would be my first one because Christian and Christian and Trent last year combined to play just 14 games.
14 games.
So that's not enough. And Christian has missed at least 10 games in 3 of the last 5 seasons, and he's had almost 1,900 touches. So you know what? I'm worried about Christian's health. So that's my first one because the Niners are this kind of a team with Christian and this kind of a team without him. So I would say his health is primary, and then I would say pass rush. And if we go back to this question from Ricky, what position at the trade deadline? I think it's pass rush.
Defensive end.
And I got one last question on your way out the door, and that's this. Simply, would you make this call?
That's a good one.
Would you make this call?
The Niners.
This isn't 35 million a year. This isn't Trey Hendrickson where you need Bosa money. You know, we have one Bosa. Now we're paying 2 Bosas. Yeah. Obviously, I'd rather have Trey Hendrickson. He's got 35 sacks the last 2 years. But Trey Hendrickson, you can't afford. But you can afford this guy.
Yep.
And this guy, I think, is a really good football player. And Dane Brugler, who I had on right before the draft, loved Shamar Stewart. And I know a lot of Niner fans think they know him because they looked at his sack totals and saw that he didn't have a lot, and suddenly they're Shamar Stewart experts. And I got people coming out of the woodwork telling me he sucks. But the thing is, you're talking to a guy who is a Texas A&M fan. So I watch A&M football every week, and I know exactly what Shamar Stewart is. And Shamar Stewart is awesome. He led A&M in pressures. He is a freaking amazing talent. He was a 5-star recruit, and he doesn't play defensive end all the time. He plays 4-eye, he plays inside, and he led them in pressures. He doesn't sack the quarterback as much as he needs to. He needs help, but I think this guy's better than Mykel Williams. And if I could get this guy, I'd be willing to say, here's Robert Beal, here's my next 2 second-round picks, send him on over. What do you think?
Better than Mykel Williams. That's quite the statement right there.
I believe he is. I really believe that. I believed it going in, and I believe it coming out.
Well, look, Chris Kocurek was said to be a huge fan of Shamar Stewart, and John Lynch said something right before the draft. In our defensive scheme, it's really important for defensive ends to set the edge. We've been missing that the last couple of years outside of Nick Bosa. Well, 2 of the best players at defensive end and setting the edge in this draft, Mykel Williams and Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart, to me, it's very odd how athletically gifted he is. He earned a perfect 10 on the relative athletic score, yet he only had 1.5 sacks in each of the last 3 years. Now, a lot of that can come down to scheme usage. He's a little bit raw. He doesn't have a deep pass rush bag, and that impacts his ability to win. That's also an issue with Mykel Williams. He is not a refined pass rusher either. And with Shamar Stewart, a freak athlete who, if you get him in this scheme where he has that runway at defensive end, a lot of the talking points and the thoughts that we have on Mykel Williams can be applied to Shamar Stewart as well. And you made an important point. If you trade for TJ Watt, you trade for Trey Hendrickson. Those are older players on the other side of 30 who are going to be looking for more than $30 million per year. Shamar Stewart would be on his rookie contract if you exercise that 5th-year option for the next 5 years at a very affordable rate. Mykel Williams can play defensive end. Shamar Stewart can play defensive end. Mykel Williams can play defensive tackle. Shamar Stewart can play defensive tackle. It would give you 2 of the most athletically gifted defensive ends in this draft class to a point where the Niners would pull off an insane maneuver if they made this move
And he's perfect for their 4D end alignment, which is what they use on the money down, third down. Do you want to beat the Eagles? You better win on third down. And if you had this guy and Mykel and Huff and Bosa, I look at pass rushers in the NFL like starting pitching in baseball. There is never a point where you have enough.
Yeah.
And if I could add one piece to the puzzle, I wouldn't mind a receiver, but I like Cowing. I like Watkins. I wouldn't mind a safety, but I like some of the guys they got, including Mustafa and Brown. I wouldn't mind a corner, but they got 7 new corners and a lot of young guys, including Darrell Luter, who needs time. I don't want to see the Niners cut another good young corner like Sam Womack and Deshaun Jameson for veteran guys. So I don't want to plug it up with veterans there either. But this guy with this kind of motor and this kind of versatility with Chris Kasarik at this point in history, I'd be willing to make a borderline bad trade to make this happen.
Here's the thing, too. 2026, the Niners have their own first, their own second, their own third. They have 3 fourths. So that's 6 picks inside the first 4 rounds for the 2026 draft. They have their own, they have a compensatory 5th, a 6th, and another 6 in that Jordan Mason trade. So you have a lot of good draft capital. Are you willing to give up a first next year for a first of the
Probably
Bengals
not.
this
Probably
year?
not. I don't know if I'd want to give a 1, but if I could give a package of picks and a player or 2 that wasn't a 1, I think I would do it. The 1 maybe
third?
not. How about a 2 and a 2, a player, and a 27, either 2 or 3, kind of to be determined based on what he does.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people will say, oh, he's a malcontent with Cincinnati. Sign the contract. No,
he's not.
This is the Cincinnati Bengals being a dog shit organization that is historically cheap. Shamar Stewart has said that players in the Bengals locker room have told him he's doing the right thing. If any of you are unfamiliar with what's going on, the Bengals took him 17th overall out of Texas A&M. He didn't partake in rookie minicamp, OTAs. Then he left mandatory minicamp because the Bengals are trying to put certain clauses in his contract that don't exist for other players. And what's crazy about this, the Bengals already know what the financials are going to be for this deal. It's already set in stone given the draft slot where he was drafted. But they're trying to add these clauses in there that other teams don't add, and it makes no sense. And they're just trying to win this argument and debate. And so Shamar Stewart had a weird interview in his locker room where he's like, yeah, the Bengals are just trying to win arguments. The Bengals are being cheap. The veterans.
Didn't you think it was weird that he was there? Didn't you think it was weird that he was there? I mean, the Bengals allowed this guy to hold court in their locker room,
that is
ripping
weird.
their team. I mean, what kind of, do they not have a phone that connects between the front office and the PR staff?
Yeah,
I mean, why would you allow a player to hold court to rip your GM and your owner? And I mean, it's like the Niners, Corey Rush would never allow some discontented linemen to sit there and just rip Shanahan and Lynch to death in the locker room. What?
Yeah. And this
That's
is
crazy.
after they moved off their DC and Lou Anarumo. They have lost a lot of marquee defensive players. They just cut Jermaine Pratt, who led the team in tackles last year, and they haven't paid Trey Hendrickson. It just doesn't make sense. So I'm not worried about the person that is Shamar Stewart. This is more of a case of the Bengals just being a shit show.
Yeah. Well, and, Shamar Stewart just wants a contract that everybody else got.
Yeah.
I mean, Amarius Mims was drafted by the Bengals and in the first round, and he didn't get this default clause that can void all this guaranteed money in the future. Yeah. So why the heck should Shamar Stewart have some default clause that wipes out guaranteed money? Anyway, I personally, I think there's a lot of 49er fans that think that this guy's just not very good. And I think they're wrong. I think he's really, really good. And this is the kind of piece that if I could get him, I'd make that move. Chase, what do you got going the rest of the day? What do you got cooking? You got some videos, you got some chat sports. You going live later today? What's your Friday looking like?
I am going to go live a little bit later today. So be on the lookout for that. That's Friday, June 13th. So going live here in a little bit on the Niners Report. So if you want to come hang out, join me. Going to go live around 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. And then obviously so much Niners content to come out throughout the weekend.
Yep, absolutely good stuff. Make sure you give Chase a follow at Chat Sports. That's going to do it for us today. I may hook up with John Lund later today for a little Giants-Dodgers bottom of the pint, so look for that. We'll see if Johnny wants to do it. If he does, we're on. So check that out tonight at roughly 7 o'clock. For Chase, I'm Larry. Have a great day, everybody. Go Niners. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for supporting the Krug Show. Hit like and subscribe. Thanks to Mancini's. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle. Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of.